Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I am Sean Butler. I hope you're all happy and healthy, doing the things that you love with those that you love doing them with. It is Friday. It's a hot Friday, lunchtime. I hope you are all enjoying the preamble to your weekend, guys. This is your Tottenham transfer news, views, and clues update, where we summarize what's going on in the things that probably won't happen for Tottenham this summer. But if it's in the news, if it's in the zeitgeist, we bring it to your attention. And today we've got a bunch of stories, most of these names you'll have heard before, but some updates, a couple of bits and pieces, and some takeaways, maybe some assumptions that we should be ludicrously liable to make because we just don't know what's going to go on. Let's start, though, with some favors. If you don't mind, guys, would you do me the favor of hitting the like button for me on the video? Get the weekend off to a good start for Shawnee boy here. A like would be most greatly received and appreciated. Your like game is super strong. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. We're over 26K now on the march to 30K, but I guess the next big number, the next big milestone is 50K, so we're only halfway there, but that's what we're going to try and achieve, and hopefully we'll do it at some point. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's topics. Now, we're starting off with a name that doesn't pop up too often, but when it does, I usually come across with a real old school bias. Because for some reason, ever since I've watched this guy and known about this guy, for something about him that I've never been on board with. But I have to admit, his numbers are very, very impressive. At whatever level, whenever he's been asked to, his numbers are very impressive. I think maybe my resentment towards the idea of signing him started with him disappointing me when I watched Canada in the World Cup last time round. I was looking forward to seeing how good this guy was, and he absolutely stank the place out. And then whenever I've seen him since, whenever I've watched him since, which is rare, I've always thought he's underwhelming. However, then I don't watch him for long periods of time. And I check in on him, and his numbers are sensational. He's got 1 year left on his contract. This is Jonathan David, by the way, if I haven't already said it. Sorry, Jonathan David, that plays for France, plays for Lille, plays in France, plays for Canada. 1 year left on his contract. His numbers last season were 47 games played, 26 goals and 9 assists, which is 35 GA in 47, which is essentially a G or an A every 1.3 games. And guys, when I look at his stats overall, don't really kind of shy away from those sorts of ratios, right? If you look over here on the right-hand side, and look, he's played everywhere over his career in what Tottenham are looking for. If you're looking for versatility, then you certainly got it in him. He can play left wing, he can play right wing. He's obviously a support striker and attacking midfielder, and mainly, though, as a centre forward. But look at these numbers, just as a centre forward, 142 games, 78 goals, which is more than 1 in every 2. 16 assists. So when you add that together, is 94 GA and 140, which is essentially 2 GA every 3 games, or 1.3 games per GA, give or take. And that's over the period of, I mean, the guy's 24 years old, so he's still young, still got a long way to go. Listen, can you see how my sort of my approach is shifting here? Just on the off chance that he does sign for Tottenham, just on the off chance that he smashes it out of the park, I'm covering both angles because I have never been a fan of this guy, but I have to be honest, his numbers are consistently very impressive. Even when you do look at the areas where you kind of go, all right, well, forget about Canada, forget about the French league, because you never really know how they're going to translate. But even at the Champions League a couple of years ago, 3 goals in 8 appearances, you know, he's done it. He's done it consistently in all competitions at every level that he's been asked to play. And I can't help that for some reason I've got a distaste for the guy, but I shouldn't let that influence you or shape your opinion of the guy. He's only got 1 year left on his contract. And the story is that Tottenham, alongside United, West Ham, Aston Villa, and maybe Newcastle, if Newcastle have to sell a Callum Wilson, or God forbid in their eyes, an Alex Isak, then they would also join the party. It's the same teams that we are linked with. Whenever we're linked with a player, these other teams are linked with the same players in every position. It's almost just like an easy copy and paste for some of these journalists. The valuation is £25 million, shaped because he's only got 1 year left on his contract, and apparently he's ready and willing to move on to the next stage of his career. Now, like I say, I'd rather us go in a different direction. I really would. But there's a common theme that is coming across to me today from some of these stories that are out there. And I think it might be to do with the fact that, or the theme, as you're going to see, is that some of the valuations and the names and the skill levels and the concepts of the players we're looking at today in today's news and clues are a little bit lower, a little bit second tier. Like the second guy, Sebastian SZYMANSKI from Poland, who plays for Fenerbahce. Turkish media are now on this one. Now, you know, on this channel, we take a large slice of salt with our Turkish media reports. But for what it's worth, Ben Jacobs also won't let this one go. And he's at the Fenerbahce forward, plays left, right, centre, kind of like a poor man's Pedro Gonçalves. Also linked with 3 or 4 different clubs, also linked with the same 3 or 4 different clubs in the UK, but also on top of that, linked with Lazio and Marseille. 55 games last season, 13 goals. One in every, what's that? 1 in every 4, something like that, which isn't bad for a player that's not kind of an out-and-out striker, but, oh, geez, like a forwardish player, like on the left and on the right, can play a little bit of everywhere, through the middle. He's a good player, but, you know, how much can you really tell for him playing, you know, Poland and Turkey? I don't mind him, but he's not the sort of, doesn't get me excited when you compare him to the links of the other players we have been linked with, like Nico Williams. You saw Nico Williams yesterday against Italy, just devastating stuff from that guy. You'd love to get him in. And so if there is the money available, if Tottenham were to change the habit of a lifetime and throw a little bit of extra risk on. So I don't know if you guys saw the live stream that I did with Johnny the other day, where we were talking about the problems with FFP and PSR, and we reviewed trophy successes over the last 75 years and Tottenham's valuation metrics. But in a nutshell, part of that 2.5-hour stream was looking at Tottenham's FFP situation. And of course, I don't have all of the detail to be specific, and there's room for this to be slightly wrong. But from what I looked at, you know, looking at Tottenham's FFP, this is all of the data regarding the 2021 season, Tottenham's revenue, Tottenham's net spend in euros, qualified into pounds at today's exchange rates, the agent's fees, from where I gather the agent's fees from this data here, which I went and found for the 3 years that are rolling into those amortized periods. And then obviously the wages as a percentage of our revenue, which I took there and made some simple math. I did the same for the 21-22 season, and the same for the 22-23 season. Now the 23-24 season isn't there yet, but in order to get the actual FFP number, you have to look at amortized transfer fees, not just transfer fees, and that is where it's slightly different. But in a nutshell, 80% of the revenue is what we were allowed to spend. And the conflated revenues are 1.3 billion over those 3 years. 80% of that would be 1 billion. This is to get for Europa stuff. Then you factor in the different numbers of how much money we've spent on agents' fees, squad salaries, and amortized transfer spend. Now, amortized transfer spend, as I say, is different to transfer spend because you factor in the total amount of money spent on the player divided by the length of the contract, etc. And what you come to is essentially this number here, 271 million, which is slightly different to the total net spend. And in a nutshell, you've got 143 million pound away from the limit of FFP, including baking in the ability to amortize that. So Tottenham, when people say 400 million pound worth of spend away from FFP, they're miles off the case. There is still a lot of wiggle room, but it's whether Tottenham wanted to take it or not. And if they did, the whole point of that kind of little side gambit there was that, you know, then Tottenham can, if they really wanted to stretch the risk portfolio, go in a different direction, hoping that maybe they were to have some new investors coming in, which is the point of that live stream. Go back and check it out if you haven't already seen it. It has been chaptered so that you can go and skip through to the parts that you're more interested in, because it's a long show. But when I look at the likes of SZYMANSKI and I compare him to the players that were at the top end of the market that we've been linked with, I'm not that interested. When I look at Jonathan David and I'm comparing him to other players that I think are more suitable to what we need, I'm not that excited. But maybe, just maybe, some of the reasons why some of these names are being linked is because Tottenham are not going to push the boat out once again. They're going to stick to their usual risk profile. And if they are definitely trying to get hold of Eberechi Eze, then not only is that £68 million a massive outlay for a player, but on top of that, apparently the contract stipulates that if you are going to trigger that release fee, then Crystal Palace are supposed to get a massive chunk of it up front, which obviously screws up so much of your amortized availability, messes with your FFP in incredible amounts. And as I always say, you don't have to, unless it's stipulated into the contract in a certain way, then a club that doesn't want to sell their best asset but is being forced to because of a clause in their contract which offers a release fee, then there's no need for them to be considerate of the buying club's FFP position. And if Crystal Palace are already facing the prospect of losing Elise to Chelsea, there's rumours that Mark Gahey might also be on the way out the door, then Crystal Palace and Oliver Glasner, they could go from having a wonderful kind of squad baseline, like a spine, or maybe the opposite of a spine, like the shoulder width, and some awesome potential, to being ripped apart, getting a lot of money in to rebuild. But Glasner might be sitting here going, well, I had so much to work with, now we got to restart again. And so in an ideal world, they probably don't want to lose all of those players at once. And so they would make it ridiculously difficult, if possible, for Tottenham to get hold of Eze. And so if Tottenham are still determined to do that, then that might be why we are linked with some of these players that are a little bit more underwhelming in terms of the actual valuation metrics, because you can't do it all in one window. Let's carry on, though. So Jonathan Dabb is the first name. Szymanski is the second name. Manor Solomon exit is likely. It's on the cards, as I've been saying from the get-go. 201 minutes of football he's only managed to play in the Premier League for Tottenham. Paul O'Keefe on Last Word on Spurs. Shout out to those guys. I'm going to be on their channel, by the way, in a couple of Sundays' time, making my debut. So I'm excited about that. That's very nice of them to invite me. On that show they did the other day with Paul O'Keefe, he was talking about how strange the whole Solomon deal was, with Shakhtar's CEO threatening to sue us, taking us to the Court of Arbitration of Sport, the CAS, and the FIFA rule, and all these things. In a nutshell, Tottenham might be willing to sell, which always made sense to me, that it was just one of those things where, like you're buying a house to flip it, you know? You buy a house that seems to be a little bit run down, and you put a lick of paint on it, some new carpets, and then you add 30 grand in valuation, you flip it, and thank you very much, move on to the next one. And I think that was maybe the intention with Solomon, but obviously Solomon's injuries have just ruined that whole story. And Solomon, look, like I've always said, he spent more time in his career on the treatment table than he has on the football field. And so why take up a squad spot? If you can liquidate, get any money for him, probably do. Gives you some room for, if you wanted to go again and get a winger and a forward, a striker in this summer. Riccardo Calafiori, the big name, the one that we all want. Everyone in the world wants this guy. Amazing performance for Italy against Albania. Scored an own goal yesterday against Spain. It was very unfortunate the way it bounced off of the keeper. Took 2 deflections on the way through. Like, compared to the next Paolo Maldini in a lot of spaces. So Tutto Juve, who are a Juve Boast Italian journal, they basically kind of are pretty well informed on what's happening within the Juve scene, are saying that Spurs are willing to pay the £38 million or euro, I'm not sure, price tag and get it done. The issue is, first of all, The Athletic are also saying that it's not just Tottenham that are interested outside of Italy. It's Bayern Munich are interested in looking at the guy, and are Manchester City. And, if Manchester City come in, then they'll probably want to, Calafiori might have his head turned. But the essential problem with the story, as far as I see it, is that Calafiori doesn't want to leave Italy. He only wants to leave Bologna to go to where Thiago Motta is at Juve. AC Milan are also trying to buy him, but he, like I say, doesn't particularly want to go. He'd rather, according to these reports, go to Juve to play alongside Motta. But Bologna don't want to sell him to a club in Italy. This is not the first time you've heard me say this. So it would take a lot of convincing for Calafiori to leave Italy, to come to the Premier League. It seems to be a common thread. We went through this with Bastoni a couple of years ago under Conte. A lot of Italian players just don't want to leave Italy and would rather stay where they are. Maybe they're kind of just, home junkies, I guess. I get it. Italy's a lovely place, lovely part of the world. Why would you want to leave and come to England where, 9 months of the year the weather sucks? And this particular year, today's one of the first days the summer's been barely okay. Let's move on from Calafiori and talk a little bit about Andrea Pereira, the number 10 at Fulham. He's come out and once again has spoken about his future and said he doesn't want to talk about it right now. He wants to focus on the Copa America, but where he does want to move to is a Champions League team. So he's basically ruling out anyone that's not in the Champions League, which rules us out. That's fine with me. As I said, I like the player, but as I've said many times now, I think the guy needs certain players behind him to allow him to do what he needs to do, and Tottenham don't have those sorts of players. So we move on. Tottenham might have had those players if Paul O'Keefe is right, and if two of the players that I put on my top 10 DMs that Tottenham need to look at this summer list way back in, I think I put that video out in April, I think it was, or late March. Amadou Onana and/or Ederson are Tottenham's preferred links. And Paul O'Keefe once again confirmed that those two are on Tottenham's radar and should be, because they are perfect fits for the DM role that we need. Well, they're not perfect fits. Ederson, I think, is the best fit of everyone out there that's a realistic, gettable, achievable target, even though he's going to cost the best part of 50 million and he's just qualified for the Champions League and just won, the Europa League. So is he really going to want to leave? Is he definitely going to want to come to Tottenham? You'd have to incentivize it in a way to make it make sense. Tottenham for sure wouldn't be the only team in England or in Europe that will be after him. He is a very, very, very talented player that can do a bit of the versatility, can move forward, can drift into more advanced positions, but when asked to sit in the 6, can do it. When asked to play in the 8, the double pivot or the single pivot, can do it. As I mentioned before, his time in Brazil before he moved over to Italy, where he was struggling to fit into a certain system, allowed him to kind of spread his wings a little bit and learn a little bit of everything. And it's been to his benefit. At the time, it seemed like it was a negative for him, but it has proven to be of benefit. Now, let's see if we move for either Onana or Ederson. I prefer Ederson over Onana. I do like Onana, but I just think he also has a little bit of a concentration issue and can go a little bit sleeping and has a mistake in him at times that obviously we'd rather not have if you can avoid it. But for most part, his engine, his movement, his passing, his tackling, his strength, his aerial strength, his ability to read the game, all of those things are massive positives. And I'm a big fan of Amadou Onana. Pete O'Rourke, Football exclusive, Football Insider exclusive from fame of that regard. Well, he's doubled down on Tottenham's move for Weston McKennie. A couple of days ago, he came out saying that that it was one of his exclusives that Tottenham are after. We're going to hijack Aston Villa's move for Weston McKennie. That was poo-pooed by about everybody that's a higher tier ITK in the world within 5 minutes of it coming out. Today, he's come out with another article saying that Aston Villa's just move with Douglas Luiz going to Juve and the Samuel Illing Jr. story of him coming this way with some money plus Weston McKennie. Well, that story apparently is breaking down, and Weston McKennie is not going to be part of the deal because he's been priced out at £15 million for Aston Villa. And so he's saying that Tottenham are stealing a march on the Weston McKennie story. Now, look, I, of course, have absolutely no idea what the truth is. He put out the exclusive, but he puts out a lot of exclusives that never come true. And so, like I said before, you have to be a little bit careful that when you cry wolf one too many times, you start to be taken less seriously. And then when he puts out the exclusive, and then within 5 minutes, it's denied by people like Fabrizio Romano, by people like Paul O'Keefe, who say that that story was just laughed out of town by Tottenham when people were asked within Tottenham's insider area. Then you kind of go, well, the likelihood is, like me, I don't know. I'm just bringing it to your attention. But the likelihood is there's no truth there. And if there was truth, am I okay with it? No, not for me. I think Weston McKennie is a bang average mid-level footballer who has had decent moments, but generally speaking, is no better than an Ollie Skip in my mind. No better than a Piere Emile Hojbjerg. Certainly no better than a Piere Emile Hojbjerg. And, you know, is a B-Tech version of Conor Gallagher. And a lot of people think that Conor Gallagher is a B-Tech version of what we need. So, you know, a lot of movement, a lot of like running around, a lot of energy, but not a lot of output, if that makes sense. A lot of input, not a lot of output, a lot of sideways passes and all that stuff. And yeah, so I'm hoping it's absolutely not true, but it's in the news, so I thought I'd bring it back to your attention. Pete O'Rourke is saying it's still on and Tottenham can stand in. And look, if it is true, then again, maybe this all comes back to this idea. Look, the names I'm bringing to your attention today, Jonathan David, £25 million. Well, why is that story coming up when we're talking about Ivan Toney for 40 or 50 or maybe even 60? Maybe that number's too much. SZYMANSKI for 20 million when we're talking about players like Nico Williams for 45, or Federico Chiesa, who I'm going to come to in a second, for a little bit more money. Why are these kind of like lower valuation names coming up? Does that have anything to do with any of the Eze stuff and the fact that we might have to pay a huge chunk of our budget up front in order to twist the arm of Eze to come to Tottenham, if that's still the story that we believe is the most likely deal of the summer? And according to people like Paul O'Keefe and all those guys and Fabrizio Romano, that is the story. So interestingly enough, let's just move on to the last couple of stories for you guys. Joe Rodon, Ipswich and Leicester, according to Ali Gold, are massive fans. So of course are Leeds, but Leeds have got £100 million worth of losses to figure out. They're still in the Championship. They're financially in a real bite and a real struggle. And so whilst Joe Rodon would be happy to go back to Leeds, it's still going to cost 10 million, 12 million pound. And perhaps it makes more sense for one of the promoted teams like Ipswich and Leicester to go. They will have that bucket of money that they can do some rebuild with. And I think he would do well at Leicester, just like Harry Winks did as well. So Joe Rodon, I'm sure, will still leave the club this summer. Just depends to who and for what price. But it's looking more and more likely that he won't be going back to Leeds and that he'll be going to either Ipswich and Leicester, according to Ali Gold. Now, Federico Chiesa, the winger, the Juventus winger, 26 years old, played yesterday against Spain. Don't know if you watched him, paid much attention to him. I was really impressed with his work ethic yesterday, his willingness to run and drive off the ball, willingness to kind of try and connect the play. Look, Spain were brilliant yesterday against Italy. Italy were really pushed back for most of the game and looked just well off it compared to the youth exuberance and the kind of guile and cleverness of Spain's technical abilities. And so Italy were kind of camped in their own half and defending for a lot of the game. But when they did break, when they did get the ball and when they could move forward, ultimately a lot of it came to nothing. But Chiesa, for me, demonstrated a work rate and an effort that I thought was really impressive, and a willingness to move into clever positions, to win the ball back deep and then carry on running for it. And it was an area of Chiesa's game that I hadn't really seen too much of before, because obviously for Juve, when you see him play, it's not often that Juve are going to be camped in their own half and be on the back foot as much as they were like Italy were yesterday. So it was just interesting to see that side of his game, and he really ticked a box for me. So I thought, as much as Italy struggled, I thought that Chiesa was really good. 10 goals last year, 26 years old, can play off both flanks, and is a really good player, and that link is still there. But again, I keep having to bring this up. You know, it's Italian players leaving Italy, coming to the Premier League or coming to Tottenham. How often is it happening, and how often do we hear this kind of story that they'd rather stay at home? You know, rather be in Italy. I'm sure there'll be someone that can easily just tell me, Sean, here's a list of 500 Italian players that have left Serie A to come to the Premier League. I'm sure there's a never-ending list of them, but I'd also argue that there is a theme, whether I can prove it or not, but there is a theme that I think that some Italian players just prefer to stay at home. Much like, to be entirely honest, there's very few English players that are playing overseas. More so now, but back, you know, when I was a teenager, in my teens and 20s and early 30s, it was very rare to see English players playing overseas. So, yeah, I don't know, but he's a really interesting player, and the money for him, I didn't actually see what the links were regarding the money, but that is the story, that Tottenham are very much linked with him, as are Manchester United, as are Aston Villa, as are West Ham, as you know, same old team, same old links. So yeah, that's about it, guys. I believe that's about it for today's transfer news, views, and clues. As I say, if you haven't already seen that story about like the video, the live stream I did with Johnny, I'd go back and take a look at it. It has been chaptered because I think it's quite interesting when you look at the kind of rules of FFP and how many loopholes there are within it. And what we did was we sort of explained 5 that have already been taken advantage of by teams like Chelsea, and then we I just brought up 5 examples that I kind of made up in my head of other ways that loopholes could be exploited. Then it leaves you with this kind of really bad feeling in your stomach that FFP will always be something that the teams with deep pockets, the teams with relationships, multi-club ownerships, with third parties that have connections to other teams, that there's ways for them to circumvent the rules to be able to suit. And so whilst it might have its intentions to kind of level the playing field to a degree, the ultimate outcome is that unless the rules are made watertight, or unless the rules around multi-club ownership or separate things that are allowed to happen that are not necessarily to do with financial fair play, but the overlap of its influence is very much there to see. Then you're always going to have a situation where FFP might hurt the smaller teams that overspend and that don't have the opportunity to hide or you know, misrepresent the truth. But the teams at the top can always seem to find a way to get away with it. And on that basis, Daniel Levy has, in my opinion, done a very impressive job at having the vision and the foresight to see what was coming and to try his best to prepare Tottenham for a world in which FFP had rules that had teeth. But if those rules don't have teeth, then preparing us for a system that on paper was clever, but in reality isn't really going to play out that way, leaves you with a feeling that his risk appetite is never going to allow us to win more than one trophy every here and there when variance is at play. And in that video, we look at the previous 75 years of teams that have won trophies once and once only, more than once, the commonalities of the teams that have won the vast majority of trophies, what are the underlying common denominators within those systems, and how does Tottenham get from where we are to be a part of that. And to me, it requires, in a world where this FFP doesn't take shape the way we were hoping it would, then it requires, if not a different owner, then certainly movements towards things that will help you be able to close that gap, like multi-club ownership, but not just one team, but several. And in order to do that, you need significant investment. And in order to do that, then Daniel Levy, if he wants to do it all by himself, then that's going to divest and diverge money away from Tottenham to make it happen, which won't make anybody happy. And so we'll need, you know, third-party owners, whether it's an MSP Capital, whether it's Liberty Media, whether it's someone completely different, whether it's a sovereign fund of one of the few countries left that don't already have investments in the Premier League, whether it's a QSI, a Qatar, Sheikh Jassim, whoever. If Tottenham are to go down that path, then I think that you need to have some support in terms of the ownership model. And so we discussed all that in that video, and we will continue to discuss it because I find it a really interesting topic. So let me know your thoughts, guys. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on all of today's transfer news, views, and clues. Sorry, it's a long one. Like, subscribe, and comment. And yeah, come on, you Spurs. Come on, you England. Come on, Southgate. Figure it out, mate. A little bit less shoehorning of everybody into the same team, regardless of position. Kind of, let's think a little bit more about how the balance works, shall we? Maybe consider the left-hand side a little bit differently. Consider whether Declan Rice is the right player to be playing in the 6. You know? I don't know. Anyway, not my job. This is a Tottenham channel. Speak to you later. Bye-bye.